Arkansas. What do you need to know? First question I have about Arkansas is with their secondary, safety in particular. I was at the Arkansas-Cincinnati game to start the year last year, and they had devastating injury at that position, and it just doomed them for the rest of the year. A lot of folks deal with injuries, not making excuses, but Barry Odom, the defensive coordinator, he's moved on to UNLV, and so they've got Travis Williams, who is the new DC there, and they got a lot of staff shakeup, actually, and they've got new players there as well. Their defense last season, 101st nationally in points per game. They were, man, that number looks crazy. They were 131st in pass yards allowed per game. Let me give you the worst stat to me. The explosive play rate, that is allowing a play of 20-plus yards, they gave up 90 of those. You only play 12 games. I think we may have included the bowl game here, but they gave up 90. That's good for 131st in the country. That's worst in the country in explosive play rate given up. So, yeah, obviously the biggest question with this team starts with the secondary, but it's not exclusively there. On the offensive line, at the tackle position, they got to have some recruits step in. They also, look, the interior offensive line looks a lot better for them maybe than the tackle position, but also just looking at line of scrimmage in general, their defensive line should be a strength of their team. What I'm curious about is, you can talk about your 2 deep or your 3 deep, and they have very, very quality depth there. I wonder how many difference makers they have. I wonder out of that group, do they have a guy or a couple of guys that are capable of wrecking games? Don't have to be Ndamukong Suh, obviously, but do they have some of those guys? Those are some questions there, because outside of that, you also have just the overall internal dynamic. I know people who watch the show, or obviously Arkansas fans, folks who listen to Trey Biddy over there at Hogs 24/7, for instance, you know about some of the internal dynamics last year that weren't exactly swell, and some of the staffers that have moved on, not just talking about coordinators. All of that blends in. So there are a lot of questions here. I'm just doing 3. The third question, by the way, for me is wide receiver development. 5 of their top 6 pass catchers are gone, and when it comes to the guys returning, 3 of their top 4 returning pass catchers are tailbacks. So they've got to have some guys emerge there. Now, this is not going to be the most pass-happy offense in the SEC or the country, but Tyrone Broden, Andrew Armstrong, our guy Varquez Gums transferred in there from North Texas, and our guy, Isaac Tesla, who we're not quite sure on the pronunciation with yet. There's 2 A's on the end. So it could be Tesla, could just be Tesla. Could be any of a number of different pronunciations. We'll get that squared away. He comes to Arkansas by way of Hillsdale College. They got Texas A&M Commerce on here. We got North Texas represented, Bowling Green, Hillsdale, like we just talked about. So they went far and wide looking for help in the wide receiver room. They got some good size. Isaac T, 6'4", 215 pounds. He's one of our sleepers. Nationally, no one's talking about him. Just folks at Arkansas are talking about him. The best position group on this team is running back. You could throw in some D-line in there, but it's running back. They have really, really an embarrassment of riches, starting with Raheem Sanders, Rocket Sanders to you and I. But they've got A.J. Green in there. They got Rashad Dominion. They got K.J. Jefferson is the quarterback on this team, who is essentially a running back in his own right. Raheem Sanders is the one you're looking at right there. But Rocket Sanders could actually... I don't know if I want to say this. In a just world, I'll say it this way. In a just and fair world, Rocket Sanders could challenge for the Heisman Trophy. This is not a just and fair world, so Rocket Sanders probably will not challenge for that award because it doesn't actually go to the best football player or most outstanding football player in the country. We've known that for a while. But they got a ton of quality tailback options there. And they've got Dan Enos, the new offensive coordinator, with those weapons and the questions out wide. So it should be a sledgehammer of an offense. That's what it should be this year. Their breakout player, Chris Paul Jr., Pooh, as they would call him, at linebacker. He started the final 2 games last year. He played in all 13. He was a freshman All-SEC. He's the kind of guy that you could see a C on the chest of. Captain material. They love him. They think he could lead the team in tackles this year. He was 5th overall on the team last year and didn't even start until the final 2 games of the year. So he is a name to look out for. If you watch a lot of SEC ball, if you're in the SEC West this year, that's a name you need to know. Then we get the schedule. And I could explain to you, as I do every year around this time, how ridiculous Arkansas' schedule is. Believe it or not, it's a little more workable this year than it was last year. That is relative. But why listen to me when we had our buddy Trey Biddy texted me earlier today, and I am not betraying his confidence as I read this on air because he would have it no other way. Listen to this. There's a 4-game stretch in the middle of the schedule where Arkansas is not at home once. All 4 of those games are against teams in the top 18 of the playoff odds. The first 4 SEC games were all played outside the state, starting on Sunday, September 17th, after the Brigham Young game, until Saturday, October 21st, when Mississippi State comes to town. There's a 34-day stretch between home games for Arkansas. Additionally, they have a bye after the MSU game and then play Florida after that. That makes 55 days between BYU and Auburn, where they have 1 game in Fayetteville. There is not a year that goes by that I don't look at Arkansas' schedule and find myself saying, how did they let this happen? But yet it happens every single year. I will say this, at least it lets up a little bit next year. Next year, they don't play Bama, they don't play Georgia. The SEC did not deal them the frozen sledgehammer to the crotch that they normally do in virtually every category possible. But they still got a tough one this year. Let me just, as you look at this schedule on the screen right now, as you're listening on podcast, you know that whole argument we've been in a lot about how many conference games do you play? Let me tell you why it doesn't matter to me. 8 versus 9 really doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to get worked up too much about it because Arkansas is a team that plays 8 conference games. They play in the SEC. At LSU, Texas A&M, at Ole Miss, at Alabama. And that Texas A&M game, by the way, is not at Arkansas. It's in Dallas. So in a 4-week stretch, they go to Baton Rouge to play LSU, to Dallas to play A&M, to Oxford to play Ole Miss, and to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama. They'll be playing Alabama essentially as the 4th road game in a row. Those are 4 conference games. I don't care if they put 3 or 4 high school teams on this schedule the rest of the way. That chunk right there, that month-long stretch alone would be tougher than many full schedules that a lot of these folks in 9-game conference schedule land play. And the reason is because this is not the NFL. In college football, losses carry a whole lot more weight. And the chances of you going unscathed, the chances of the University of Georgia, of Ohio State, of Michigan going unscathed through that stretch are slim and none. Arkansas, spoiler alert, Arkansas is not going undefeated through that stretch. And so if you're talking about playoffs, you're talking about SEC West, you're talking about SEC championship races, that's insanity. It's total insanity. And yet there it is on their schedule. So you want to know why I don't get worked up about that whole 8 versus 9 debate? This right here is a team that plays 8 conference games. None of you have a tougher stretch than that. None of you. I don't care if you play 10 conference games in the ACC or the Pac-12. None of you got it tougher than that. I've said my piece. I will stand up every time when it comes to scheduling for Arkansas.